Paul Hill, who murdered an abortion provider in Pensacola, Florida in 1994, said, when I do this, I'm going to be the John Brown of the anti-abortion movement. Most people who say that are deluded, right? They're wrong. But I don't want to say they're crazy. They just don't understand the politics and the political conditions of their time. Slavery was central to the political economy of the United States in the 19th century. To challenge slavery meant to rock the foundations of the country. Abortion has never been central to the political economy of the United States, no matter what the Christian fundamentalists say. It never has and never will be. When you kill an abortion provider, you do not rock the foundations of the country. But you can see how Paul Hill is borrowing from the extremist playbook. Now, based on this definition, does the Tea Party count as extremist?
Yeah.
Do they refuse to compromise?
Yeah.
Yes.
Check. Do they mobilize based on that refusal?
Yes.
Check. 2 of the 3. Do they engage in unconventional and extraordinary means?
Yes.
Some of them do.
Such as?
Some don't.
White-haired ladies railing against Medicare.
That's not.
Is that, I mean, it seems to me that the tradition of protest is an old and respected one in the United States. I would not necessarily regard that as outside the boundaries of politics. Yes, sir?
Bringing guns to presidential speeches.
Did the guy break any laws to do that?
No.
This is Arizona.
Those are good shot tactics. Something like, but people for the ethical treatment of animals do that all the time so shocking our sensibilities. Certainly extremists like to do that, because what the extremist believes is that when I shock, I'm going to shock the nation and I'm going to crystallize public opinion. People are like, oh my God, we've been in a stupor the whole time. The extremists are right. So they're definitely looking for that kind of crystallizing, shocking moment. But I don't think just if we're in Arizona, carrying a gun on your hip, perfectly legal.
Or in your pocket.
Or now in your pocket. I could be armed right now. You don't know. So don't disagree too much with me. Yes.
No, I don't feel they are, because they really don't go outside the boundaries. I think they work within, and they come off as being, I'm your regular mum and dad out here or whatever, and I'm just trying to keep the Constitution, and they're trying to tell everybody that they're wrong, and that everybody else is extreme, and they're actually very moderate.
This is my take as well. This is why, regardless of what you think of the Tea Party, I don't like their politics either. What I don't think it's useful necessarily to regard them as extremists, because they so far are acting entirely within the respectable political channels, and in my mind they're almost completely captured by the Republican Party. Now, and they're really serving the function now of what the social conservatives served in the religious right served in the late 80s and 90s in the Republican Party, is to be that far right cohesive core that forces all the Republicans to pull them as far to the right, especially during primaries. But so far, the Tea Party seems to me to reject unconventional and extraordinary means. Now, if the Tea Party starts organizing militias, then we might start talking about an extremist movement. But I hope you can see the differences.
Yes.
Now, based on this definition, let me ask you another question. Is this approach to politics always unjustified?
No.
Is there something to learn from this sort of politics? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that people use the internet, for example, Facebook or Twitter or blogs, to promote, their ideology or whatever you want to call it, and maybe to draw in more people to their side. So.
I think the internet becomes a tool that extremists use, that the Obama campaign uses. It becomes a tool that a variety of people use that aren't extremists or aren't. And frankly, if the goal of an extremist is to build a dedicated core that is completely committed to those principles, I frankly think that the internet is not a very useful tool for recruitment, although it can be a useful tool for propaganda and for internal organization. But ultimately, how do you recruit people? It's personal. It's one-to-one kind of relationships. I don't think those old-fashioned kind of politics have really changed that much with the internet. And if you want to bring someone into your cause, it's not enough to put a bunch of articles about your politics on the website. You've got to make those connections. And that is especially the case, I think, with the extremist approach to politics. Yes, ma'am?
In regard to what you were asking, I'm guessing that there are times when extremism is very important, and it's important to know when to use it. And I don't know all of those things that bring that about, but I think there might be times when it's important to use it.
Yeah, the question is, I hear you saying is, when is extremism justified, morally justified? And ultimately, I think we can only answer that retroactively. Historically, I mean, Stephen Foster was regarded as a fanatic, a zealot, a nut. He was hated. He was, like I said, he was nearly lynched. And now we look at him as a hero. So ultimately, I don't think we can say, because if we respect the principles of pluralism and diversity of thought and opinion, then I don't think we can say your cause is right and your cause is wrong, and therefore we can say your extremism is justified. That's always going to be a political conflict. We can't absolutely determine that with the capital T truth. So I think that means that we have to expect that people who are pro-life, for example, are going to engage in these kind of politics. And those who are against, those who believe in reproductive freedom, need to say, maybe relying on the state all this time, since, at least since the 90s with Clinton, maybe that strategy has had some negative ramifications that we could, if we're not abandoned, at least rethink. Yes, sir.
I think your point 1 and 2 are relatively easy to incorporate and accept. Number 3, however, I think requires a little bit more definition, explanation. Outside the boundaries, we put respectable in quotes. What the heck is respectable? And are we really talking about pure violation of law, of existing law in the locale in which the action takes place? Or, is there some other area? Because if by most definitions, the extremism then virtually doesn't exist except in really rare, we'd have to say that probably the act of taking down the World Trade Centers is extremist, because that's outside the, by anybody's definition. But it seems to me we're still leaving a gradient there without a way to, get from non-extremism to extremism in the third point.
Well, that's an interesting point. It seems to me that when I talk about respectable politics, that's fairly obvious to me, like working through the political party system, working through the existing channels, donating money to candidates, using the existing bureaucracy, the existing political channels, voting, campaigns, elections, and other forms of legal protest, etc.
What about public lying? Absolutely lying when you know that what you are saying is an untruth, but it serves your purpose.
If I regarded lying as extremist, then I'd have to regard all of American politics as extremist. And so, no, I don't think, I would not regard lying as outside the boundaries of respectable politics. We expect politicians to lie to us. They lie to us in the primaries about what they're going to say, and then they move from the left to the middle or to the right to the general election, and then they still don't carry out what they say, and then we still re-elect them. Lying is not outside the boundaries of respectable politics. But I would say that, if you want to, I would say that obstructing church services that are not anti-slavery, I would say that is outside the boundaries of respectability. I would say that attacking abortion clinics is outside the boundaries of respectability. I would say that organizing armed movements to march up and down the streets in defense of the Constitution, or in the case of Italy, to the March on Rome that installed Mussolini into power. All those extra parliamentary, extra legal activities that, if not always themselves illegal, disregard the law. That seems to me to be a body of actions that we can identify, and we may disagree on the margins, or we may debate the margins. And I kind of left the term deliberately somewhat vague, but I think it does help us distinguish between certain kinds of political tactics and actions and others. Yes, sir.
Well, the things that are sticking in my mind when I hear you speak are, number one, the Emerson and Thoreau's exchange. What are you doing in there? What are you doing out there? When Thoreau was jailed, and the letter from Birmingham jail by Martin Luther King. I mean,
In which King explicitly owns up to being an extremist.
Yes, he says, you know, at some point you have to move.
He says that all those clergy who are criticizing him because he's taken too much of an extremist approach and won't take a more moderate approach to desegregation, he says, well, shoot, I must be an extremist then.
Yeah, because, you know, how long do you expect me to wait?
That's right.
But have we not, at least in this country, drawn a line between, say, for example, civil disobedience going limp and a grenade attack on the local police station? I mean, since the revolution anyway, haven't we kind of, at least in polite discourse, haven't we drawn a line between those two things?
The state has certainly drawn a line. But at some point, the extremists may say the state, well, the extremists almost always do say that the state is in league with evil, and we must therefore disregard what the state says. So when the Fugitive Slave Act is passed in 1850, you have what we would call now mobs of people with battering rams attacking the jails in Massachusetts to try to physically free people who've been nabbed under the Fugitive Slave Act and are being waited to be sent back down to the South. Some of whom were free men of color, and never were slaves, but have just been identified as slaves by agents. And I think we would all now wish we had, again, we would like to be in that mob. And so at a certain point, yes, you have to go outside the boundaries of the state, because the extremist almost always identifies the state as the enemy, and therefore anything the state says or does is illegitimate. And that raises questions. And when you hear Tea Party discourse that says not just is the administration wrong, the administration is illegitimate, is outside the boundaries of the constitutional rule, that to me says, all right, now I'm starting to hear unconventional and extraordinary. When I just hear them, pissing and moaning about that on the internet, whatever. But when we're saying that we now need to mobilize about that, then I think we are in the at least in the gray areas of the extremist approach. Yes, sir. Way in the back. You haven't spoken yet. In the red.
I'd be curious to see if your definition would apply to the Bush-Cheney administration with regard to attacking another country that has done us no harm, and in regard to instituting torture.
This is
300,000 civilians?
well, welcome to war, right? I mean, to me, the basic question you're asking is can the state be extremist? And I want to say, in some instances, yes. I think the Nazi state was extremist. I think Stalin would count as totalitarianism would count as extremist. But otherwise, I'm hesitant to do so. So I would say that Bush and Cheney, no. You may disagree with them, but and what they may have done is, in a sense, redefine what counts as respectable politics.
It's totally against convention
They are not in prison. They are not facing any charges. They
got congressional support.
They got congressional support. I would not want to argue that is extremist. Which again, if we think of extremism as a cuss word and say, I want to cuss at these guys, then call them fanatics, call them zealots. But if you want to understand extremism as an approach to politics, then I would have to say, these guys are mass murderers, but they're not extremists. Yes, ma'am.
Well,
one of the things that came to mind is the idea of war, and what essentially you're creating, or you could be creating a situation where, I mean, and you hear about the abortionists, a lot of the